Wow. Just wow. Wow at how long it has been since I last spoke to you guys. I would like you to know, before I go any further, that I have filmed at least 5 videos over the last few months that I planned on editing and uploading and sharing with you guys, and never got around to posting any of them. So it's not for lack of trying that I haven't been active on BookTube, it's just for lack of succeeding. First of all, I feel really awkward because I haven't done this in so long. And second of all, I was like, I don't really know how to begin again with the booktubing thing. I'm not really sure what to do. So I'm kind of just, my plan is to, oh my god, I'm doing such a terrible job of explaining this because it's been so long. So my plan was that it might be a nice idea for me to kind of just like scroll through my Goodreads and just look at the books that I've read since the last time I made a video, which I think would have been August, and just have a chat about the books that I've read. So here we are. I have scrolled down to July, Augusty area, and I will tell you no, let's just have a chat about some books, guys. Okay, so first up on my list, we're going from least recent to most recent here. So the first book that I read, according to this, was of course Sense and Sensibility, which I did talk about briefly because it was featured in my blogs for Booktubeathon. I was listening to the audiobook of it for Booktubeathon and finished it during that time. Gotta be honest, I wasn't too impressed as far as Jane Austen goes. I found it really hard to sympathise with any of the characters, and I certainly didn't want any of the relationships that, you know, are the end goal of this romance novel to be achieved. I thought that they all had a lot of problems. They were quite problematic relationships, and I just didn't want any of the women to end up with any of the men that they were sort of pining after, so that was a bit disappointing. I feel like Jane Austen's always a bit touch and go. There's ones that I love, like Emma and Pride and Prejudice, and there's ones that I don't love so much, like Northanger Abbey and apparently Sense and Sensibility. So there you go. Next up, I reread the #1 Ladies Detective Agency for the first time since I was in primary school, because I read these books when I was in grade 6, which is an interesting choice because they are actually adult fiction, but and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was very cute. One interesting thing that I kind of picked up on reading it now as an adult is I'm not quite sure how people feel about the perspective of a Botswanan black woman being written by a white Englishman. I'm very curious to try and find some reviews and or discussions from people about that, if any discussions have been had, because I kind of read it and was like, I don't know how good this is. Like, it could, for all I know, it could be fine. Like, people could be like, yes, it's written by a white man, but it's all thoroughly researched and it's all good. Or it could be like, oh my gosh, this is the worst, this is horrible and like very insensitive, and I don't know. I'm not the person to be telling you these things. I'm not sure. I don't know. I want to find out more. But the actual story itself is beautiful, and it's just as heartwarming and just lovely and good vibesy as I remember it being, so that was quite nice. Next up, I read a little collection of short stories that was an impulse buy called Swimmer Among the Stars. This was actually absolutely beautiful. So it was I walked into a bookshop, because that's what I do. I saw a book that was pretty and I was like, I'm gonna buy it. And that is what I did, and it was pretty, and the words inside it were also pretty. So it's a collection of short stories, all of them at least somewhat centered around Middle Eastern culture, which I think is the culture of the author who wrote it, and it was just really lovely. Some really beautiful concepts of stories. Like, there's the very first story is the title story, Swimmer Among the Stars, which is exploring the concept of being the very last speaker of your language in the world. It's a story about an old woman who happens to be the very last live speaker of her language that she grew up with, and obviously she speaks English as well, and she's being interviewed by linguists and about her language experience, and asked to just kind of say, you know, every word, like everything that she can think of in her language in order to try and capture this language before it dies with her. And so that, like, for me as a linguistics student, was really beautiful to read about, and just like really just lots of interesting, unique concepts for short stories in this particular collection. Next up, I read Anna. No, I didn't. I just marked that as red. Never mind, we're not going to talk about Anna Karenina. Next up, I read Crazy Rich Asians, which is a book that someone sent to me through a book swap that I was a part of on Facebook, which was pretty cool. And that was awesome because it arrived just at the time that the movie kind of came out. So I read the book and then went and saw the movie like 2 days later, and it was lovely. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed the movie. I film a video talking about the book and the movie and my thoughts on them and the pros and cons of each of them, but guess what? It didn't happen. You already know that because there's no videos on this channel, but it didn't happen, so that's fun. Then I reread Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom and had all the feels about that, and I still want to make some reviews and discussions about that because I never even did it last year, and I still really, every time I reread them, I get more thoughts and more feelings and things that I just want to say about Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom because they are straight up my favourite of all of the YA books that I have ever read, and the more times I read them, the more they become just my absolute favourites. So I really need to do that, and I will because I have a lot of feels, so that's fun. After that, I finally finished reading Fingersmith, which is a book that I've talked about a lot as a book that I've been halfway through reading for like 4 years now. So I finally actually finished it. Well, I started again because it had been so long. So I was like, well, there's no point in trying to pretend that I understand what happened plot-wise here. So I started again and reread it and actually finished it, and that was beautiful. That was an excellent read, strongly recommend. Sarah Waters is very well known for being a really unique and original historical fiction writer. So she writes historical fiction books, but she always gives them a little twist, something that's a little bit new and different, which I always find incredibly refreshing because a lot of people who write historical fiction seem to think that because it's set in historical times, you need to go with like the same conservative ideals and things that we assume that historical times had. And Sarah Waters is like, yeah, nah, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna do some fun stuff, but it's also gonna be history. And she does it in a way that you're like, this could have happened. She doesn't take the things that we know that are true from history and like change them. She keeps all of them, and she just kind of asks these questions about like what might have been going on behind closed doors. You know, how can we possibly say whether or not these kinds of things did or didn't happen? And I think that's wonderful. It like fits into historical fiction without turning it into like fantasy or just like completely rewriting history, but it still gives it this really nice modern twist and makes it much more unique and original and just interesting to read. So that was good times. Then I finally finished reading Perfume, which is a book that I started reading last year, which you should know about because there was a video in which I decided to start reading it and then never finished. Haha, surprise, surprise. But I finally did, and oh my gosh, what a good book. Just a good book. I think I said this before, I kind of wish that I'd gone into it with different expectations because I think one of the reasons why it took me so long to read it was like, I had this idea in my head that Perfume was gonna be like a fucking horror movie, but in book form. Like it was supposed to be, it literally says in the title, story of a murderer. And I was like, right, well, you know, stabby stabby, we're gonna be reading Psycho, but with Perfume for some reason. It's not like that. It's actually like a really slow burn. It's more of like a, not thriller, but more like horror. Like it makes you feel horrified rather than making you feel like on edge. It's just like this constant like, oh, this is weird kind of feeling rather than like a suspense kind of feeling. So that was really interesting, and it took fucking ages for any murders to happen, despite being a book with the word murder in the fucking title, which is fine. I'm okay with that because I changed my expectations and reread it with new expectations and we were all good. And also like remarkably funny. I gotta be honest, like Patrick Susskind has a wonderful sense of wit to his writing for someone who is writing about like a really fucking morbid subject. Like it's quite morbid, but it's like morbid in a way that it laughs at humanity. You know, it's like this sort of self-satirical kind of humor that is twisted in with it, and I thought that was really, really fun to read about. It's always nice to see someone who's kind of like, we're a little bit fucked, aren't we? So that was good. That was a good time. Then I read then some of you might know about this because I kind of went on a little bit of a rant on Twitter, but then I read Wuthering Heights, and oh boy, I am in a state of confusion as to why anyone likes this book. I am really sorry. I do not understand it. And the weirdest part is that I fucking love Charlotte Bronte. Like, you guys know that I live for Jane Eyre as like one of my ultimate like top recommended books of all time. Of like, if you want to know what Jazz is like as a human, read fucking Jane Eyre. But apparently Charlotte Bronte's sister, I don't know. I didn't like it. I hated it. I hated every second of it from like go to woe. I was like, this is the worst. I hate all of these people. All of these people suck. I do not want any of them to be happy. This is not a love story. There's no fucking romance. I don't understand why anyone talks about these people as like pinnacle literary couples. For a start, everyone has the same fucking name, and then they get married and still keep the same fucking name because they're marrying each other and just like messing everything up. Look, I'm gonna have to make a separate video about it, but let me just suffice to say that I was shocked at how little I liked it for a book that is like top classic. I need to sit upright instead of being a weirdo, and I probably need to tilt you down just a smidge. That probably helps a little bit. Whoop. Hi, it's still me. After that, I read a parody called 50 Shades of Earl Grey, which was fucking excellent. It was so good. It's a parody of 50 Shades of Grey. Admittedly, by the end of it, I was like, this is getting pretty monotonous. Like, it's stupid. It's so dumb. And I gotta be honest, I was a little bit disappointed because I read the title 50 Shades of Earl Grey, a parody. I don't know why, but in my head I was like, I felt like it was gonna be like 50 Shades of Grey, a parody set in London with like lots of tea. I was like, this is perfect. This is my style of book. I really, really want to read a parody of 50 Shades of Grey, but instead of Seattle, it's London, and everyone is just like drinking fuck tons of tea. But it wasn't that. It was like your standard ridiculous parody novel with just like random shit happening. And it was still funny, and it was ridiculous, and it was lighthearted, and it was just a good read for just like lighthearted in between reading other books kind of read. But it just wasn't what I was expecting, and I think that disappointed me just a little bit. After that, I read Mortal Engines because my new boyfriend asked me to read it for him because there is a movie of it coming out in like just over a week even, I think, and he's very excited to go and watch it, and he knows that I can't watch movies without reading the book first, so he was like, please read it and then we can go and watch it. So I read it, and I was pretty impressed with that too. So first of all, the premise is like one of the more unique kind of concepts for a fantasy and or dystopian book that I have come across in quite some time, because it's like post-apocalyptic dystopian planet Earth, which like everyone knows that as like a basis for a dystopian novel is fairly fucking common. Most of the kind of like post-apocalyptic dystopian planet Earth novels based on something like the Chrysalids, whereas Mortal Engines is like, you know what, we're gonna go a little bit crazy here. And so there's a whole fucking ecosystem of like towns getting eaten by like slightly larger towns getting eaten by cities that then get eaten by like fucking monstrosities like London, and it's fucking amazing. So it follows London, a city on wheels that is like rolling around Europe trying to find other cities to eat as like part of like ecosystem chain of like, you know how these things work. Biology, ecology, things like that. And I thought that was really, really unique. Like, what a cool idea. Taking like the sort of food chain, but making it actual cities. And so that was fun. I really enjoyed that. The characters were pretty cool. As far as like YA fantasy goes, it was very mature in terms of like writing style and plot content, like very different to kind of the YA fantasy that we get nowadays, which I think is interesting because it was written a while ago. But there were little bits of the writing that kind of confused me. For example, lots of tense changes that didn't really seem to make sense, that I was like, I feel like nowadays an editor might not let you get away with the change from past to present tense. And then, yeah, some various like plotty character-y things that left me feeling a little bit what, but mostly it was just, yeah, just enjoyable. Good times, good plot, like kept me on my toes, kept me wanting to know what was gonna happen next, and I'm very excited. And I am very excited to watch the movie, so that was fun. And then finally, most recently, I read Sunstone, which was that was fun. That was like my second ever graphic novel that I've ever read. And yeah, so Sunstone is a like BDSM comedy romance novel, which honestly is adorable, and I do recommend it to like, and just, you know, anyone who wants a nice lighthearted read. It's like this really cute romance between these two women who have like never really done BDSM before but want to, and they're just like decide that they want to try it together as like their trusted other person that they want to give it a shot with, and then of course feelings get in the way. They're also just like adorable dorky nerds that just like make your heart like this. They're just like, they touch your heart. They're very cute. And there's plenty more, apparently, of this romance, and that took me like an hour to read, so I feel like it doesn't really count, but it does count. It's on my Goodreads. It counts. Yay. And that's it. This is my 20-minute update on the books that I have read since I last did anything on BookTube. Welcome back, Jazz. I'm gonna have, got a few other videos that I want to film now, because I am gonna do the thing again, I promise. So I will see you very shortly for another video, I'm sure. And until then, as always, stay classic.
Sit there and count your little fingers. Unhappy little girl blue.